Hello all and welcome to Graven Offerings, Working with the Dead and Our Ancestors. I hope you enjoyed tonight's discussion. So also any questions, there'll be question time at the end of the workshop for anyone that want to ask questions about what I'm going to previously say or just general questions. So first of all, I'm going to start the workshop with the word graven. So as you know, in the workshop, it's called Graven Offerings. And the reason why I've chose that word, because it sort of has a double meaning. So in the Oxford Dictionary, graven can mean an image or something working with the dead. Graven as in like to engrave, i.e. an image, or graven as in the grave, working with the spirits of the grave, or necromancy it can be referred to as well. But that is sort of why I've chosen the term graven offerings. Also, it's the term of a really good book you should read, which is called Graven Image by oh god, I remember now. But yeah, that's a big hefty book on using image magic. However, yes. So this workshop is going to be divided in 4 sections. So one part is going to be called Graven Offerings, and these are the offerings that we make to the dead and our ancestors. Then the one next is going to be like working with the graveyard, like, and how we incorporate like the dead and the ancestors in our practice, magically, spiritually. Then we're going to be calling the next one's called Graven Images. So it's using deathly images, idols, into working with our ancestors and the dead. And then finally, it will end on graven rites. So rites and rituals we can involve in like necromancy, in working with our ancestors, we're working with our mighty dead. So it's going to be in 3 sections. So first of all, I want to like sort of give some context to ancestor veneration in itself. So ancestor veneration can be seen in many cultures and many faiths. It is probably one of the oldest in terms of up there with like animism, the idea of looking upon our ancestors, people who are of our kin, our sacred kin that have gone before us, have done great things, and that we look upon on ourselves, in ourselves. And really with the ancestors, I always say like, they're a lot easier to work with than a deity or a spirit or a saint, because with working with other spirits, we have to create that relationship a bit, to a part of trust, and a working relationship has to be built there. Whereas like our ancestors know us, whether we know all of them, they know us. They're in our DNA, they're in our blood, they're in our facial structure, they're in our bone. We are indeed, like I said, with other spirits, we have to create shrines and altars and relics to connect with saints and spirits, angelic beings, deities, whatever other spirits you work with. However, we are the altars of our ancestors. We are the actual altar. You don't necessarily need pictures or icons or mementos from our ancestors. However, they do help us connect with a specific ancestor that we work with, or we admire in our ancestor veneration. However, what is different is that we are, putting them aside, and I certainly do have an ancestor altar, which I'll show at the end, and give examples of what little things that I do to sort of work with the ancestors, and that can really kind of enhance your practice with them in the communication. But we are the altar of our ancestors. We hold the DNA and the bones and our blood of the ancestors. Even if you can look upon yourself and look people of your beloved dead. You know, there might be a relative that you look like mostly, or you might see certain things like the eye color, nose, ears. Certainly for myself, I take a lot after my mum's side, the Irish side of my family, and I look very much like my granddad, who was a bare knuckle fighter, you know, and there's a picture of him in his youth with his boxing gloves, because back then, you know, you couldn't do bare knuckle fighting, it was against the law in England. And that's the time when they sort of emigrated from sort of Ireland to England. But I can look at little features like nose, ears. I'm very much like him. And all very much like other parts of me, like from my dad's side as well. My body shape, my hair color is a lot more darker than my mum's side. Certainly got bits of ginger as well. That's coming from my dad's side, who's Scottish. That's the Scottish influences from Aberdeenshire. You know, so we look at ourselves, and we are a mirror image of our DNA and ancestry within us. So we walk with our ancestors. They are constantly with us within our blood. You know, there's that idea of like, you know, the river of souls, the blood of our ancestors, that the river of our ancestors that flow within us. And pretty much like there was a saying as well that my friend's partner said, that he was very nervous about an interview. And this is where like we can use ancestors as a kind of mantra, or like a positive reinforcement of ourselves, because we are part of them. You know, he was nervous about going to a job interview, and my friend asked him, "Are you nervous?" And he was like, not so much now, because I hold in me the face of all my ancestors, and I know they're with me, you know. And it's the same with me. It's like, if I find hardship sometimes with my anxiety, I get anxious about the weirdest little things. And I find power within that, to look upon my ancestors and say, come on, Ash, like, you know, my ancestors went through a lot more worse things than this minute thing that I'm worrying about. You know, they've gone through world wars, they've gone through struggle from coming from Ireland and to England, and, you know, persecution. And so it's really good that you can use as a mantra to yourself, taking power of the ancestors and being empowered yourself. And what else is like with the ancestors, like with, is that they pretty much can be worked as we do with deity. I'm sure there's like many trades and skills that within your ancestors that are hold, you know, like either they're a policeman or, you know, a soldier, you know, for example, you know, my great uncle, which is my grandma's brother, he was an upholsterer. He actually had his eye taken out when he wasn't paying attention, and someone called him and he went, what? And the needle went straight into his eye. So I work a lot of sewing, and I make a lot of things. So when I begin to create something new, or I have a lot of orders that have to get through, I call upon my great uncle Cyril, because he was a upholsterer. I also ask him as well that I pray to him that, because I have to use a lot of long needles, like pins and needles when I'm creating things, which is another, which I know he's here today, Camden, you know, came with his beautiful set on, you know, image magic and doll magic, this massive needle and these beautiful scissors, which I use constantly in my craft and my crafting and making as a creator. But yeah, so I also pray to him that when I'm working with these dangerous objects, that I don't have to suffer the same fate as him, that, you know, I don't want my eye taken out. So I pray on my ancestors. So, you know, and like I said, you can work with your ancestors in a way of like deity. So, you know, if you have a soldier, protection. If you have a nurse in your family, healing. If you have a banker in your family, then that's money and finances you've been asked. You know, estate agents for a new home. You can pretty much, if you know of your ancestry well, I have to be reminded it all because of my family and the way they are, the Irish, and the Scottish side as well. You know, family and ancestors are an important thing, and stories of them and are always held within our heart and carried on through their memory. And that's another thing, you know, it seems to be a universal truth within cultures. I can relate within the Scottish culture and Irish culture and Gaelic culture, you know, that there is that belief system that we keep. The reason why the ancestors are alive is because we keep them alive within our memory and our veneration and the way we uplift their souls in and going further as like animists and magic practitioners do, are making offerings to them, whether on like some feast days or a party. I know for myself, you know, if I'm having a party or I'm having a drink, you know, my ancestors are doing the same. You know, I'm lighting a little candle, I'm lighting some incense, and give them a wee tipple there and here. I like to give them as well flowers. Ever so often, it's got this beautiful vase, which I'll show you, which is the represented the cornucopia, you know, the cone of plenty. If someone can just mute their mic, if they can, I can still hear it. And I give offerings of flowers ever so often because they are symbolisms of life and death. You know, they come out, their bud, they flower, and they die and they wither. You know. And also like to use them and dry them out, like for spellcraft. And the water from the flowers can be used for working with the dead, working your ancestors. A lot of the flowers that if you place in vases and you smell the water, it's actually sweetened by the fragrance of that flower that you've offered. So you can use it like for you know, cleansing baths, or you could use it for floor washes. And adding that, you know, extra protection from your ancestors in your home. But yeah, like I said, say if you know, you need some protection, you could, and one of your ancestors are a soldier, you know, you could ask for that ancestor to protect you, to guard you. You know, a nurse, healing, someone needs some healing, ask for their spiritual power of their gifts they had in living, to bring it in spiritual power to you, of that power, that nurse, like healing, banker, finances, you know, estate agents, you know, new home, you know, the list's endless. You know, like me, I'm a creator, and there's a lot of like sort of tailors and creators in my family on my mum's side. So, you know, when I'm creating things, I'm calling them in as well. I'm feeding them and lighting candles to them. But yes, so you know, offerings to our beloved dead is very important. What is within them is within us. We hold them abilities, as well as the DNA and the spiritual connection, the ancestral blood that flows with us and flows in us. What we change in ourselves change the ancestors. You know, I was having a discussion with the Wicked Witch of LA on Instagram about ancestor veneration recently, and we went into discussion of, you know, ancestral healing. You know, whether your ancestors are, you know, oppressors or ancestors of the oppressed. You know, of coming to that acceptance to try and heal them. You know, healing, it heals ourselves, and it allows us to understand, you know, past traumas, whether the oppressor or oppressed. And I also asked, you know, the question like, what if one of your ancestors, you know, did something wrong, was a racist, or, you know, serial killer, or something like that? And I was asked, how do I deal with that? You know, and first of all, I just don't simply acknowledge them. And you know, like my grandma just said, like, you know, someone passed, that wasn't a very good person. She would very cut the situation right down, and would say, yeah, take no mind, and God bless them. So it's like, it's not take no mind of them, bless them, God bless them, God forgive them. And it's like cutting me off. And also it's saying, like, yet to not think about them, because the act of thinking about them is veneration itself. It's bringing their spirit alive. And these people in your ancestry, we certainly don't want to be venerated. And some hope, we hope that in the afterlife they learn from their lessons and they come back maybe a better person. And people ask me, is there something that I do as regards to that as well? Certainly my gran on, All Souls Day would pray for those sinners, or them souls who are in purgatory, as she would call it. She would pray for their forgiveness, that God would forgive them. However, I don't really take that approach. I'm not religious. I'll work with certain Catholic rites, but I'm more of an animist. So what I do is I pray that that ancestor takes the same fate and what the injustice they have done to that person. So if they were a racist or whatever, let them become a person of color in the next life, and see them how it feels for them, and that their soul goes through some kind of spiritual learning and evolvement. But yes, so that in the ideal of spirits. Now, obviously, part of working with the ancestors and the dead is working at the graveside. A lot of times within families, there's specific times that we go to the graveside and give flowers. In my family, it's All Souls Day, or and Boxing Day as well, or Easter as well. All Souls Day is, praying for those souls in purgatory, or their past, or those visiting this this earth. Easter, because it's a massive, Easter time is a massive part of representation of the the resurrection of Christ and the resurrection of the soul. And it was once said, around Easter time, the presence of Jesus, or Good Friday, sorry, as well. Good Friday is the presence of Jesus not there, because he's not resurrected yet. And so Easter is a time where people pour flowers on graves. In my family as well, we do that. And we also do it on Boxing Day. So Christmas as well, it's a time of family. It's not just about the living, it's about the dead as well. A lot of cultures involve that, and then obviously the big one is Halloween, or the Days of the Dead, or a lot of cultures have this specific time within the winter time, where the dead is honored and venerated the most. So yeah, so working at the gravesides of our ancestors and dead is a fundamental part of ancestor veneration, because that's where the bones or the ashes of our ancestors are kept. They may not necessarily be there, but they are connections to us and the ancestors. They're earthly beings, that they're reminder of their earthly experiences on life on earth. So first of all, I would say, when you go into the graveyard, there's a lot of act of respect that you have to take on. So one being, paying homage to, the grave grim, or the guardian, and the grim used to be someone that it's seen as the guardian of the graveyard, and often this was someone who was the first one buried. Or sometimes it was a dog, an animal, because a lot of people, especially within Protestant areas, wouldn't want their relatives to be the grim. So they would bury, if it was a new graveyard, they would bury an animal instead, so they become the grim. So often they can be like animals. So praying and paying homage to the grim of the graveyard. Often I throw coins at the front entrance of when I'm entering the graveyard. And also, taking on board of protection as well when we're working the grave. You know, there's going to be spirits out there when we're in the grave that probably are not so nice or welcoming to you being there. So protection is needed. Within Gallic faith, you know, we do something called casting of the cane, and a cane is something that you trace around yourself with your finger along the compass with a charm or a prayer that it's a portable protection. So where you walk, you are protected within this circle, this cane of protection, under, whether it's under like St. Bridget or St. Michael or whatever deity you choose. It is your faith, it is your practice, so you can, you know, you can tailor to your, you know, spiritual gnosis, sorry, not gnosticism, your spiritual gnosis. And another thing is, you know, is working the grave is in something as simple as making sure that the grave sides are kept well, you know, that they're clean, that they weed it, you know, the weeds are not grown over there, you know, and flowers are offered. And often in my family, we offer like, maybe offer like a can of beer or a bottle of ale, and place it on the grave and leave it open, you know. And it's that idea that as the, you know, the ale or the beer stales, the vitality of that beer or substance you're offering goes to the spirit. So it's not the physical thing that we're hoping to like sort of disappear because one of your ancestors are taking it. No, it's more the idea of, you know, the vitality, the substance. In Gaelic, this is called tariv. You know, the tariv is the substance of something. It is the vitality of something. It can also mean like luck as well, depending in its context. But, you know, tariv is essentially the substance which we offer to the ancestors or the dead or spirits. Another thing which within Gaelic culture, you know, or in Celtic culture as well, so like I see it done in Welsh and other parts of Celtic regions, is canes or cairns, stones, and this was an old long tradition of honoring the dead. Often, you know, and this was like a pile of stones that you sort of create. So you gather stones and you pile them and position them so they're sort of oval. They can be something as small as that or really large cairns. But essentially, like, they were used in place of if there was no gravestone or the family couldn't afford it, or someone who had died there. Today, you see if someone dies in a certain place, but it's not a grave, you'll see like teddy bears and flowers, like maybe to a lamppost or a street sign where that person is laid dead. And in Gaelic culture, this was placing like building a cairn, you know, a bundle of stones or stains in honor of the dead. You know, and also one thing you want to keep aware of is when you're working at the grave sites of your ancestors is certain guardian trees. You know, what is the oldest of the tree there in the graveyard? Because that's also a spirit guardian, you know, a tree spirit guardian, and that needs to be venerated as much as like the grimmers. So often you'll see in graveyards, especially in Britain, yew trees. They you know, they're symbols of immortality and renewal and rebirth, because immortality because they grow at such great age. There's one in Scotland, Fortingall is yew tree just up north. That's been accounted to be like 4,000 years old, or even older. But yeah, and renewals because it's outside sheds and it grows inwardly, so it's constantly renewing itself. It's an evergreen, so it, again, immortality, you know, it's also deadly. It's very poisonous, so it associates with death. And you know, there used to be, and in folklore, in British folklore, it was said that a yew tree grows in the mouths of all the dead people. So, you know, the oldest tree in the graveyard, whether it is a yew tree, can use as like an access Monday, a connectus, like a sort of world tree for the dead, or the graveyard. So you can go there and you can meditate, you know, and sort of do some spirit travel maybe, to visit your ancestors that lay dead and buried in that graveyard. So you can, you know, one technique is like setting your back, you know, to the tree, against the tree, you know, imagine yourself being connected with that, or your spirit flying up and down the tree, as a way of traveling to the world of the dead, you know, the world of the ancestors. So we'll go on to, and also with the Pile of Rocks, you know, we see this as Judaism, as well. You know, other things you can see in cultures are like the Yiddish prayer of the dead in Judaism. There is a lot of Catholic rites which are to do with the dead as well. So we'll go on to next now is like, you know, at home with the dead. You know, what can we do to sort of, you know, honor our beloved dead and have them to be an active involvement in our life? Well, you know, I like to do what I call the Sunday service, and that's not going to church, but it's just something I like to call. So, on a Sunday, if I'm eating something or I cook a Sunday meal, or you know, I leave a portion out on a piece of plate, to put out for my ancestors, and I'll leave it there, like, and I'll eat, or sometimes I'll dine with them as well. So, and we'll go into that when we're talking about stuff like the Dom Supper, which I'll go into that. But mostly, you know, I put on a wee plate, you know, a bit of meal that I've cooked, and place it on the ancestral altar, or shrine. There's a tradition in my family as well that, you know, after someone died, and this is normally like your wife or your husband, you leave their chair, you keep their chair for a year and a day, or just a year, as respect to them. I believe my aunt, kept her husband's chair, because the elder folk, I mean now, which I love, I'm a couple like myself, that I like to cuddle up to my, you know, partner, although I'm single, you know, and my partner's a past, I like to cuddle up, but in the older folks, you know, they have their own chair, and my aunt kept her chair for like 3 years or something, and you know, ever so often she would like either give some food on the side or some water, and that is something within Irish tradition that we do, as well as the Dom Supper, which I will go into. But yeah, keeping the chair for a year, like, that's something within my family's tradition that we do. I've asked other Irish Catholics if they do the same, but it just seems to be something of my family. So yeah, you have to observe your, you know, speak to your elders, observe these wee traditions that you might have in your family, because, you know, they're important, and they might have some juice in the way of you can working with our ancestors and the dead, you know. So another thing which I do as well, and I've done in the past, I don't keep it on show, but as a way of connecting to all our ancestors, you could get like a jar or something. I used an old, I think, I don't know what it was, but it was a perfume, and it had the shape of a blue glass skull. And after I used, you know, finished the perfume, I used the skull glass, and I went around all my graveyard, around the graveyard, and gathered soil from each grave of my family, and then put them all into the glass skull and sealed it up. And I put in like dried herbs and flowers as well, and a bit of sugar and whatnot. And it became like a fetish thing, you know, a magic fetish, for the ancestors, so that, you know, when I held it, a lot of people do in practitioners today, they have a skull on their ancestral altar, and that's representative of the holy dead, or, you know, the sacred dead, the mighty dead, and you can do that. But I found what's really powerful is if you get yourself a glass skull jar or bottle, and go around your ancestors like graves and gather a bit of dirt. Obviously ask permission as well, because they are still your ancestors, you know, you don't want to tick them off, and add it all into the jar, because then when you hold it, you can call upon your ancestors a lot more easier, It's a lot more connection there. And you know, it's a really strong tool that you can have on your ancestor shrine. You know, what else? You know, incenses as well, like certain incenses, offering certain food that they may like, you know. I know as well, like I ever so often, as well as, you know, giving, you know, wine or a drink when I'm drinking or having friends around or just having a drink, you know, I put wine out on the table, a glass of them. But also ever so often I just put, you know, just a glass of water out to quench their spirit, to quench their soul. You know, it's called feeding the dead, you know, quenching of the dead. And you know, you could use vessels as well, you know, spirit boxes, mementos. I have on one of my ancestral, you know, a bone box, so it's made of ivory, and in it is items of parts, you know, like a watch, and I put my great granddad's pocket watch, my great granddad's pocket watch, and you know, having something special like ivory boxes as well, something of bone, to remind us of our, you know, of our, you know, a mortal, you know, demise, but, you know, end ourselves and our travel ourselves to the spirit world and with the ancestors. You know, one also I will admit, like you as well, is you can use order of services, right? These are brilliant. You often use this. So if you want to speak to your a certain loved one, your order of service is a real powerful thing. It was there at the day of the burial. It was given out on the service of the burial of that person. It contains the prayers that were, you know, preferred by the dead person. So the way you can work it is like, you know, if you want to, you know, petition or communicate with a certain dead one, beloved person that's passed, you know, you can write a piece of paper, you know, what your thoughts or your feelings or what you want to say to that beloved person, and pop it in the order of service. You know, pop it in the order of service, pop it onto your ancestor altar with a nice candle, or you could have it under your pillow as well if you want to provoke sort of a visit through the dream world through your ancestors or whatever. You know, work in the order of service is brilliant. So when you go to funerals, keep your order services. This one's of my uncle. Again, another William there. It's a family name, and of my dad. My dad had a humanitarian / pagan funeral, so we used a cord in his funeral, which two of my best friends had organized for me, which was so dear to my heart because he loved them and he knew them. So it wasn't some kind of priest that didn't know them and gave him that opportunity to preach about God. So this was the cord that was used in his funeral, and I often use that as well in contact with my dad. You know, I hold it, I may do knots in it, and sort of trying to lure him to contact him. Also, if for someone who doesn't have many space for a shrine or whatever, I know in the past I've lived in really small apartments where I've hardly got space to even have, like, you know, a table to eat on. You know, I find these were really popular in the 70s and the 80s as well. But yeah, like you can find little picture frames which are like sort of tree shapes. I haven't used this yet. I've been meaning to. You know, it's great because it represents a tree, you know, your family tree, the access to your family, you know, and it doesn't take up much space at all because these are small pictures. So you can have small pictures of your relatives all in one space. And what better to have a representation of a tree, your family tree, you know, being the roots of who you are to the stem and branches of who you are now today, you know. You know, you can have spirit vessels as well, like other things, like there's U-box. Some people like to use U-boxes, which is like a box made out of U-wood, you know, to carry dirt or ashes of our beloved dead, and they might put mementos in it, and that becomes like a psychopomp as well in itself, in connecting with an ancestor or ancestors. And we talk about skull vessels. I have one. I think people who on my Instagram, you can see a video ages ago, and I have on my ancestor altar a skull holder, and it's beautiful. It's very Italian sort of design, Roman Italian, and it's a tea light holder, and I light my candle on that. So it acts as as a beacon to the spirits, to the beacon to my ancestors, but also as a representation of the dead. Also, I use it for divining as well. So, there's an old tradition within Britain, where they used to put coins over the eyes of the dead to pay the ferryman. So I place coins on the candle, the skull candle holder, and I ask a question to a specific ancestor or dead, or to the ancestors in general, and then I flip the coin up, and then if it's heads, it's a yes. It's a tails, it's a no. Heads up, yes. Tails, no. It may be both. Maybe, or ask again some other time. So it might be tails and heads. It's a way of divining the dead, and that's something that I do in my practice. So we'll go on to now, like, it's Graven images. So, what can we use, like, in sort of representing our ancestors? We can obviously, that you see, a lot common is having pictures of them up, and mementos, but we can use, you can make dolls as well to represent your ancestors. In Native American culture, not that I've said for you to do that, but in Native American culture, you see like totem poles, of their animal familiars, or people, of their ancestors. So I'm not saying to do something like that, because that's a close practice, and you have to be invited for something like that, invited into that tradition. But you could do something very similar, where you could have a piece of wood on your altar, your ancestor altar, which is a connector, acts as an axis mundi between you and your ancestors. I have reeds, a single reed on my ancestor as a kind of axis. They're the fluffy reeds, and they're also known as, like, sort of in British folk magic, as like angels' wings, or fairies' broom, or whatever. So it has in it sort of that quality of travel and otherworldliness. So I use it as an axis mundi, a way to a fetish that helps me connect to my ancestral dead, which I'll show you in a bit. Using sigils as well is a great way of sort of connecting with our dead and our ancestors. There are several sigils you can use that, like, represent axis mundi, or our sacred dead. Using stuff like bone meal as well. I like to use bone meal, not so much now being vegetarian, but in the past I used to use bone meal to draw sigils on the ground, in working with my beloved dead. Psychopomps as well, brilliant. There's many, like, sort of deities and saints and spirits that are psychopomps, regards to being openers of the ways, of the other worlds, of the dead, of the ancestors. Hecate being one, she holds the keys to the other worlds. I work with St. Peter. He's also a patron saint in my family. He's a bit of a psychopomp. He holds heaven's door keys. So he's the guardian of the world, of the dead as well, heaven, me, and the dead. Although, I call it just the spirit world. I don't really specifically say heaven, But there's animals as well that can be associated with otherworldliness, with that betwixt time, like toads, for example, because they live on both land and water. They can switch between two, being in two places at once, also, like, well, I'll show you the picture frames as well. But I'll go through some rites as well you can do. So this is Graven rites. So a lot of time, there's different places that people have their shrines. They can be in the bathroom. I've seen it because it's your bathroom associated with water, and water is being the portal to the other world, to the world of the dead. I have mine in like the eastern corner of my room, the east in Gaelic tradition and Celtic, actually most Celtic traditions, the East is seen as the place of the dead, like the Eastern Isles, the Blessed Isles to the west. Sorry, the west, not east. The western corner, off to the west, and you see that within Gaelic culture, that the other world, the Tia na Turach, the land of youth, being off to the west of the sea. So I have mine, situated in the west of my house. When we're out, like, sort of doing your workings and Sabbats, I see like a lot of open rituals where they dismiss the ancestors and spirits and stuff, and it never makes sense to me, because I'm like, well, and then everyone starts eating and start communicating and like sort of chatting away and maybe drinking after like a Sabbath ritual or whatever, an open ritual. And it never makes sense to me to sort of dismiss any kind of spirit anyway, but to sort of say goodbye to them, because we want our spirits to dine with us, to celebrate with us, same with our ancestors, But one thing that I mentioned previously, there is other rites where we can actively provoke like a really strong presence for our ancestors to visit us. Within Irish tradition, it's called the Dumb Supper. And this is done on All Hallows Eve or Halloween. Where you essentially dine with the dead. So you'll have like a placemat, of a candle lit, a plate set aside, and some cutlery and whatnot. And often it's tradition that you serve everything backwards, because it is seen as that the world of the spirits are in reverse to us. So you serve dessert first to them, their main, and then their like starter or something, and then in between keep feeding them like wine and water, and that is essentially like within tradition. That's like what they do, and they may do think like walk backwards, or and they'll say the Lord's Prayer or whatnot, and that's essentially in Irish tradition. That's how it's performed. However, there's like adaptations of the Dumb Supper, which is very out, is accentuated and lengthy, which I have done myself, and that's one is mentioned, by Paul Houston's book Mastering Witchcraft. He goes on where the rites of doing the Dumb Supper should be done and prepared like a series of several nights before the actual ritual is done. And I like that idea, because when we're penetrating the other worlds, it is a slow process, and it's slowly unraveling, or pulling that desired the loved one to us. So that step of like saying doing 13 nights before or 9 nights before, doing a certain thing and preparing the area before you actually do the Dumb Supper. But yeah, like also on Christmas, other things like setting wreaths on graves and stuff, making a Christmas wreath around Christmas for the graves of my loved ones, is a big family tradition of mine. And my gran used to make the wreaths, but she's since been passed. I've sort of taken that on, so I make the wreaths, and it's just a simple wreath that I make out of like ivy and place some evergreens in between, and you know, some holly and ivy specifically. And yeah, again, it's a symbol of renewal, you know, ever life. Evergreens is a symbol that things will return again. And essentially, you know, when we're working with the dead, it is that in mind that, you know, our dead will return to us, whether in spirit form, or they will rebirth or reincarnate. You know, other things is what I like to do, which I call the dead silence. And I like to work in silence sometimes when I'm working with my ancestors, that inward prayer, that inwardly speaking, the dead silence, silent as the dead. You know, it's through imitation and mimicking the dead is that we can provoke that sort of magic, that sort of power in which we can connect with our ancestors and connect with our beloved dead, is act in accordance to what they are now, the dead. Dead silence, they're silent as the dead. Also writing writing a letter to the beloved dead in Crone's Book of Magical Words, there's a formulation for that, where, you know, you can write to the beloved dead, and I think the ink is mixed with red wine and whatnot. There's a whole sort of ritual to it, and there's a thing that you have to write out before you write your own letter to the dead. So finishing off with the workshop, I'm going to share my screen and show you some pictures which can sort of get an idea of like how ancestor veneration looks like in my own personal practice, or some of my very close friends. So let's have a look. Right. Right. So first of all, this is an image. Can everyone see the screen? God, one sec. This is like the first time sort of sharing the screen, by the way. Okay. One sec. Sorry about this. The whole thing's gone a bit bizarre. Hang on one sec, sorry. Could everyone see like the screen then? Aye. Oh, you could see it, right? Okay, I'm going to share the screen now again. Sorry about that. So as we can see here, this is one. Oh, so this is a picture from a good friend of mine. Let's pull it out again one sec. Good friend of mine. So he actually keeps his ancestor altar or psychopomp is it here. It's Ananoch, which is the guardian of death within like sort of Welsh, Cornish culture. He actually keeps this by his bedside table, and that is representation of that psychopomp of death and the ancestors. And he keeps it by the bedside table because it's to sort of provoke dreams and visions in his sleep of the ancestors of the dead. So we'll go on to other images. Here we go. We have the prayer that he uses to Ancro. That's Ancro, the hag of death of the underworld, personification of death, guardian of the dead. And that's his sort of his own sort of prayer that he came up with. Oh yes, another thing I was going to talk about. So the fact of using images in dead, like there were found near me in Edinburgh on Arthur's Seat, these wee dolls, which you can see here. There is, I think there was about 20 of them that were found in the 18th century on Arthur's Seat. And it's they're quite bizarre looking. There's quite a few of them, and they're all sort of in a coffin, they're all dressed up. And it was believed that they were put there because there's an old tradition from France and parts of Europe where if, say, someone died at sea or someone died in circumstances where they weren't unable to obtain their body for burial, a mock burial would be made with a doll in this case. So because there's like quite many of them, I think there's like 20 or 30 of them that was found. It was estimate, you know, it's surmised that, you know, it was something to do with like a shipwreck or someone dying at sea because there were so many of them. So a mimic burial. Okay, here we go. Here, this is from the book, Crone's Book of Magic Words. This is her sort of take on how you can write a letter to the beloved dead. In this manner, the letter must be written first in ink prepared from soot mixed with pale wine, next with a pen made, shaped from a quill never been cut before cut. Then the paper arranged in a paper between two black candles, and on the top of the paper this inscription text set, and that's what you have to put first. Then write down the essence of your grief and your substance of devotion, such as aspects of memory that would fix forever. When this was accomplished, fold the paper thrice and seal it, along with the sweet herbs, with a small box, ground or burnt in a fire of fragrant wood. The letter shall thus be received. So that's, you know, in Crone's Book of Magic Words, as a way of like sort of contacting it by writing a letter. Oh, that's my book. Sorry, I don't know. So I was talking earlier about like a cairn. This is one that I sort of, I did an example of when I was on Arthur's Seat for the kayak. Also honoring your ancestors beloved dead around the Christmas period. I have this decoration myself and I think it's so sweet, and I put like a picture of my dad, you know, Christmas in heaven, what do? They come down to earth to spend time with you. Save them a seat, just one empty chair. You may not see them, but they will be there. That's really sweet. I like that decoration, and I put that on my ancestor shrine around Christmas. Again, these are the Arthur Seat dolls that were found that I was just talking about. Doing things like getting a candle, you know, a votive candle, a dedication candle for your dad, loved one. This one was for my dad. I just got a simple glass jar candle. I got some plasticine or some with the sign of a cross, and just kind of put it on. This is a sigil I like to use. This is from like I think Leonardo da Vinci did this originally, but my dad drew it, so you can see Raimondo. The bird of peace is it known. I use this for it's, although it was like a drawing, a sketch by it, I use it as like kind of way of connecting with the dead. Oh yes, this is like an example of like a shrine at Mum's garden, top of Mum's garden. That's completely dedicated to my dad and all items that he liked. Again, here you can see like the decoration that I use at Christmas time for my dad. Again here. Oh yes, this is offerings to the dead as well. So, you know, a beer, I told you, I made a picture of them. You can use sigils as well, and I love using this sigil. It's from Old Devil's Fineware, which is, he does some amazing stuff, so check him out. But yeah, I like to use like sigils like this, you know, like the deer. To me, the deer man represents to me like the original dead, the great dead, and those of that passed afterwards, and the mound being the connector. It's very much an Axis Mundi. Here's an example of my dad at the shrine. This is from my old place. This is done on Halloween. Again. Oh, also honoring your dead as well. So those that are slain in battle. Remember, I was telling you about that skull jar that I used with all like sort of dirt from my graves and my ancestors. That's it there. And I found some wine that says Mills, which is my surname. But yeah, this is on like Remembrance Day, so you could, you know, and I've got a picture of the Morrigan. Oh no, sorry, the Bridget in her sort of pagan imagery of Tawafi Di Danan, you know, those slain in battle. That's my dad. Again, some more examples of sort of ancestor veneration. You could use simple signs like this as well, you know, just something as like represent Axis Mundi and the dead within the mound. A candle lit in the window of All Souls Night as well. This is something that was a very traditional within my family. It's just lighting a candle on All Souls Night. It sort of aids the dead to where they need to go or to your home. So, yes. So, not the show, there you go. As you can see, so there are some examples sort of other ways you can work with the ancestors as well. So, yes, I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm going to give people sort of 5 to 10 minutes to do some questions. So if you'd like to ask some questions, go ahead now, and I will try my best to answer them. It could be anything you like, so fire them at me. And write them in the text box, the chat room, the chat box. It could be anything to do with the workshop that wants something sort of clarified, yeah. Or me to sort of emphasize on something that I said in the workshop, or it can be something, just any kind of question, and I'll try and answer it. So we do 5 to 10 minutes question time. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Do you do anything specific when it comes to dream work to interact with your ancestors? Yeah, pretty much similar to what you saw in that picture. So I don't know if everyone has like a bedside table. It seems to be quite a popular thing here in Britain to have a bedside table, but I clear it completely, even of my lamp, and only have one candle lit. You know, I will have a picture of that person on the side. I have images of like skulls of the dead, anything possible that can give me that connection, and sort of get into that state before bedtime, and you know, calm your mind, do a bit of meditation, sort of focus your energies on that specific dead person, that specific loved one, and you know, and allow yourself to just gently fall asleep, maybe listen to some music or something like that. I have been known also to use a band as well. Like, so if I use my dad, I'm going to use his cord, but you can use a cord. Is tying your wrist to the dead as well. So with a cord, tie your wrist with your left hand, maybe, which is known as the left path to the other worlds, and tie it to the icon, the picture maybe of that person, or a thing, or to tie something above yourself, a personal object, maybe it's a necklace or something like that you want to wear, anything that's connecting, and you want to get yourself into that state before dream state of you are going to be drifting off to sleep, and you're provoking visions, you're provoking that communication with that dead person. else? I've just seen some chat on the phone. Be careful not to spoil the dead. Say to give, don't give alcohol with offering because it makes lazy, keeps lager offering special occasions. What's your thoughts on that? I don't know. I've not really heard of that spoiling the dead. I just think, in my manner of thinking and my practice, is that the more you venerate the dead, the more you honor the dead and offer with offerings to them, the more that we're uplifting them and we're making them spiritual, yeah, spirited. So that connection with them is a lot more stronger the more that we are working with the ancestors, the more we are offering them stuff, the more that we are interacting, it's a communication base. It's like having friends, the more we communicate, the more, a relationship is established. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I've never heard of it. I get the theory around it. I really do. And if that feels up to you, then go with it. But for me, I don't. I give them offerings when they are needed or when I feel they need to. How can you improve your relationship with spirits of the art? Depends what you mean with the spirits of art. If you're meaning by like the folk devil or a spirit in a sense, it's really hard. I think to maintain your relationship is just constantly having a major involvement in your life, have them. I mean, one great thing is have them tattooed on you. I love my tattoos. I have several tattoos. I've recently had one to a spirit, St. Bridget, she's a spirit. And that's a massive dedication to her. So I feel like since doing that, and I did it on her feast day, the 1st of Feb, my relationship with her is massively strong. Would you know if any one of your ancestors reincarnated, as this is something I often think about? I really enjoy the workshop and it's very informative. Right, yeah, well, I think probably many of my ancestors have reincarnated, but it depends how you view the spirit. Like for me, definitely within Gallic culture, there is the idea of the soul and the shade of this person, like the spirit and the soul. So in Gallic culture, anim is the soul, and taiv, as in taishir, someone who sees spirits. Taiv is like the shade of someone. So I believe the soul is the thing that reincarnates and is connected to other shades that it has been a part of. And the way I sort of view it is like the soul, like if you dropped oil in water, the soul is the oil and the water is the spirit of the person, the shade of the person. So I believe that the soul does reincarnate, but the shade of the person stays within the land of the ancestors. And the shade of the person is like our personality, what makes us an individual. It's also, I think, the shade that we use to go traveling to other worlds. It's not submissive. So I think if the soul was to leave your body, then you're dead. So it's the shade of your person that goes traveling to these other worlds, spirit travel. Hidden spirit travel. But I do think there's a massive distinction between the spirit and the soul, and it seems to be a lot in cultures, especially in Gallic culture. There's a distinction, of anim and taiv. Can one use an altar to their own an unknown dead? My dad was given up for adoption. We know this. Yeah, of course. No, I completely understand. So if I always say when I invoke my ancestors, I call out to my ancestor known and unknown. So it's not just to the ancestors that I know, the ones that the pictures are on my shrine, but to the ancestors that I don't know of, but they know of me. Because the way I see it, the land of the ancestors is this massive feast. and they all know each other when they simply go, when they enter that land, and they know of you and their descendants. So even though you don't know them, they know you. So you could do just a simple shrine, like for example, to connect to your island, your ancestors within Ireland and Scotland. Just put in mementos that are associated with the land of Ireland and Scotland. Maybe a thistle for a thistle for Scotland, or a Scottish flag, or a quake, or maybe some Guinness. Or I know these are stereotypes, but stereotypes come from somewhere in history, but some of them not so for stereotypes. So putting on your a little space in your ancestor shrine or altar, mementos representing that land or the people of that culture that your ancestors come from. So yeah, totally, they know about you. So just because you don't know about them, they know of you. So that's why always when I call out to my ancestors, I call out to the ancestors known and unknown. So calf and kin. I was thinking about spirits like Isabel. Do you think learn something from them and you come up with spirits? Yeah, well, yeah, like Isabel Gaudi, or Isabel, is a massive influence in my life. She has been since I was 18, and I made a dedication right to her. I made a dedication to her. Essentially, it was like a sort of spiritual marriage, where boundaries and certain codes of conduct was set between us. But yeah, definitely, I mean, she's like my spiritual mentor. She's the one that if I need to think of a spell or a charm, she's the one that is there straight away, like, do this, do that, and use this. So she's my spiritual mentor. She is my spirit that I work with in regards to working magic, folk magic, and my practice. And she's also my companion. She's my spirit companion. We have a drink. We have drink nights on Fridays, and where me and Isabel, she's invited, and I give her drink and shortbread and whatever, mostly drink. She's a lass that likes a good old drink. But yeah, like definitely, I talked about this in my ancestor workshop, of using, not using, but working with dead magicians or dead witches or dead magical practitioners, and I talked an example of Bessie Dunlop in 1560s. She did a similar thing with Thomas Reed. He was neither he wasn't a devil, he wasn't a fairy or anything like that. It's very much clear that she said he died in the Battle of Pinkie several decades before her, and he told her like charms of healing and stuff. So essentially she was working with a dead magician. So yeah, you can do that completely. I have on mine dedicate like a wee table for her, which I'll show. One sec, let me just show if I think it's in key. Come with me, I'm going to show you my ancestor shrine, which is the first table, which is when you come through the door, it's the first thing you see. So like as you see here, I've got like a little shrine here for Isabel. So she's my adopted ancestor, and I've got some pictures of my ancestors here. This is the school candle holder I was talking about with the coins, the sixpence, and the beautiful vase of the cornucopia, like that, some cat flowers. Yes. So, and I've got images like wings and nice little charm here that was made for me years ago out of like horse nails, and it represents the ancestors. And this is the reed that I was talking about. that I have. So this is to represent spirit work and angelic work, contacting my ancestors and spirits. But yeah, so that's my ancestor shrine, and it's something you see when you come through, when you first come through the door. So it's a sort of statement piece. So whoever's a visitor, they are greeting my ancestors. My ancestors are greeting them as well. And you know, so it's a statement piece really to have right opposite the first door. It's the first thing people see. They are greeted by my ancestors. Is it okay to be a polytheist and to start having more simplified way and work with spirits like St. Bridget and still honor the gods? The answer is the faith. Yeah, it's completely fine. Basically, I am not religious, I'm not pagan, I'm not a witch. I'm an animist and a folk magic practitioner, which a lot of people find it hard to see the difference between witchcraft and the folk magic practitioner, or just a practitioner. So being an animist means that I work with spirits regardless of their faith, their life, and I try and do rituals for that spirit that they can familiarize with, that they are comfortable with, that they find familiar. So, you know, you can work with like St. Bridget, with Catholic rites, you don't need to be a Catholic to do it. You can do, we're practitioners, we're magical practitioners or animists. We can do this ourselves at home. We don't need to go a priest to do it for us. We are priests within ourselves. But yeah, I don't think it matters. You can worship deities as well as saints. I do. My faith is I'm very dual faith. So, like I work with and venerate spirits that are pagan or Christian or, Muslim, Judaism, Jewish. Again, being an animist, I'm an animist. It's all about working with, it's very spirit based. So it's about working with the spirit and seeing what works for them and making them comfortable for them and putting our own, practices aside or religious viewpoints aside for them, for the spirits. Well, I'll answer this one question and then I will have to go. But I'll put the link up. I'll send the link to all of you via email so you can rewatch it. How do you make cultural and religious reconciliations at your altar when you have ancestors who historically clash with each other, those bases, and acknowledge them without offending each other? Well, this is something that I used to think about a lot years ago, and I feel like when the spirits are in the land of the ancestors, little things that are political, political feuds are no less. I don't think they are not necessarily an issue no more. I think they see more of a big picture of family and connections and ancestral connection. I think these political views that may necessarily had in life, they don't necessarily sort of see it the same when they're in the land of the ancestors. However, like again, if you could not say make a partition, but you could greet your ancestors separately. There's no harm in like having them on a table all together. I certainly have ancestors that are Protestant, Catholic, both on my altar. It's just at my shrine, it's how you broach them each. So if you're broaching a specific ancestor or a specific family member that's passed, you may want to broach them alone, like to their picture and honor them separately on the altar, not separately, but broach them individually on the altar, and use rites which they are familiar with. So if I'm working with my dad, he wasn't religious, he was more humanitarian with a bit of paganism. So that's how I broach him. If I'm working with my gran, she was Irish culture, Catholic, so I'm going to do that. I'm working with other parts of my dad's family. They were Protestant, so I'm going to do stuff that will sort of they all relate to within Protestantism or Presbyterianism. So yeah, it's all about just sort of being sensitive and you know, diplomatic to the spirit's you know, views and morals. But I don't think it's a point, just because you have them all in the altar doesn't mean that they won't get on. It's not, I don't think it's like that, but yeah. So that was my last question. I hope you all enjoyed the class / workshop. And I'll send you all a link at the end. I hope you have a good day and night, and may the spirits of your ancestors feed you as you feed them. Slan Shiva.